Why did Tony Soprano kill Tony Blundetto? The last episode of The Sopranos' 5th season takes a beloved character, but at the same time leaves a lot of questions. If you think it's simple, ask yourself, why does Tony decide not to interfere in the fate of Spatafor, giving him to Phil to be tortured? But at the same time, he personally solves the issue with Blundetto, saving the other from Leotardo's torture? Well, let's get to the bottom of this. To get to the bottom of the question, we need to remember what events led to the demise of, I can't even pronounce his name, Blundetto. The introduction to Tony Blundetto begins in the 2nd episode of Season 5. He is the cousin of Tony Soprano and Chris Moltisanti. In March 2004, Blundetto is out of prison, along with other once major mobsters. Carmine's buddies try to butter up Tony B with the help of his longtime prison buddy Angelo Gareppi. Phil Leotardo arranges the mock execution of loan shark Lorraine Coluzzo for siding with Carmine in a power struggle between Carmine and Johnny Sack. As Lorraine still declines to pay a fee to Sack, Phil and his henchmen execute Lorraine along with her boyfriend. As retribution, Carmine's followers, Rusty Milio and Angelo Gareppi, offer Blundetto the job of eliminating Joey Peeps. At first, Tony is reluctant, but after a while he accepts the job, deciding that his progression on Tony's crew is too slow. He shoots Joey and the hooker that Peeps is sitting in the car with, but the auto, while still in motion, runs over his foot. Limping, Blundetto gets away. Soprano notices that Blundetto is limping. From Johnny Sack, Soprano learns that one of the witnesses managed to get a glimpse of Peeps' killer and that he says the hitman has a limp. After putting the puzzle together, Soprano faints. Subsequently, he meets Blundetto, who stays completely unperturbed about his innocence. Although Soprano knows the truth, he convinces Sack that Blundetto had nothing to do with it, knowing full well that if the truth were to come out, there would be disastrous consequences. In revenge for the death of Peeps, Phil and his brother Billy brutally massacre Angelo. This throws Blundetto into a rage, and at night, he takes the Leotardo brothers completely off guard by injuring Phil and killing Billy. Near the 5th season finale, Tony Soprano finds himself under serious pressure to surrender a relative. Tony Soprano seems to be faced with a difficult choice that requires him to strike a balance between loyalty to his own family and responsibility to a larger mafia institution. Clearly, Tony's people are dissatisfied with the situation, as they feel endangered by possible vendettas from the New Yorkers. However, Tony is also bound to protect his family members, which includes Tony B. Bottomline. Tony is faced with having to assess the possible implications and come to a decision that is in the best interest of both his loved ones and the entire organization. Not an easy mission, but one that he will have to perform if he is to preserve his power and esteem. Throughout the episode D-Girl, Dr. Melfi has a similar perspective with Tony, underscoring the burden that is placed on each individual as he chooses his course in life. Such a burden can be a blessing, as well as a curse, as it demands us to be accountable for our choices and the repercussions they entail. Anthony is faced with a challenging dilemma, facing a choice between loyalty to his family and a distinct obligation to the organization. Many people remain skeptical of the mysticism and dreams in the Sopranos series, but I just simply can't move past it. A red barn is one interesting element to note. It is not totally clear if there is a hidden significance behind this symbol, but it is worth noting that Tony Soprano examines the red barn in Dr. Melfi's office as Rorschach, a psych test in which abstract ink blots are being interpreted. We should note that the red barn appears directly before Tony Blundetto's death. In any case, the mysticism and symbolism in The Sopranos can be variously interpreted, and each and every viewer can find his or her own meaning in these kinds of elements. Let's take a closer look at why Tony Uncle Johnny kills Tony Blundetto. A recurring theme on the show is the incapacity of certain characters, including Tony and his mother, to show and experience love. From the very beginning of the series, Tony has been discussing this subject with Melfi, and it appears clear that Livia is completely incapable of loving or expressing affection for people. The evidence suggests that she is incapable of truly showing love to her family. Thus, the murder of Tony Blundetto by Tony's Uncle Johnny can be interpreted as one of the ways Tony Soprano chose to express love. In one sense, Tony wanted to protect Blundetto from possible revenge from Lupertazzi's. Alternately, the murder could also have been a manifestation of Tony's affection for Blundetto, although he never explicitly expressed his feelings and was not apt to display emotion. The complex upbringing and the links he draws between love and the behaviors of his parents make it difficult for him to do so. Consequently, when Tony senses love for a family member, oftentimes it translates into angst, abuse, or wrath, which is vital if we are to comprehend his character and actions in the show. There is a key scene in the midst of the 12th episode, the long-term parking lot, involving Tony B phoning Tony from the bar. This way, we not only find out how Tony manages to spot Blundetto's hideout, but the scene has important story aspects to it as well. Soprano confesses to Tony B that years ago he had a severe panic attack following an altercation with his mother, thus keeping him from the hijacking. At which point Blundetto proceeds to the job alone without Soprano and is lashed by the piggies. Of note, in the wake of this confession, Tony B wonders, "So everything you've done for me was only because you've been feeling guilty all these years?" With this question, Tony's sophisticated relationship with feelings of affection and its display is brought into focus. Indeed, the prolonged pause that comes after the question implies that Tony wonders whether his actions toward Blundetto are driven by love or guilt. After talking to his cousin, Soprano was released from the guilt that had plagued him for a number of years. He found Tony B's whereabouts and made an appointment to speak with Johnny Sack. Soprano was going to hand Tony B over to Johnny and Phil, but when Tony Double asked Johnny Sack to let him sort things out on his own and act promptly, Johnny said no. This changed Tony's mind. In Sill's words, Tony reversed his decision out of pride and a willingness to shield his men from being tortured. Still, I believe he had a more profound reason. He wanted to prove to himself that he really loved his cousin, and that his behavior was not just triggered by a sense of guilt. This is when he recalls Livia's treachery to realize that he doesn't really want to be anything like her. Anthony is determined to stand up for his cousin. While he acknowledges that Tony B owes him accountability for his misdeeds, he's not going to let someone else intrude in their business. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to Vano VHS and hit the like button.